Thank you all for coming to this gathering, which is about a startling topic: Christian ministry and Christian mission through higher education in one of the most difficult parts of the world. Khyber Pakhtunkhwa province, which is the northwest frontier province of Pakistan along the Afghan border, amid the Taliban, and in the city of Peshawar, which is that ancient city, probably 2,500 years old or so, at the bottom of the Khyber Pass. Alexander the Great passed through Peshawar. Of course, the British were based in Peshawar. St. John's Cathedral in Peshawar has many plaques dedicated to soldiers and chaplains and families, women and children, who lost their lives in the First Afghan War of 1842, the Second Afghan War, the Third Afghan War, right through the end of the 19th century and into the early 20th century. So it's a bustling, thriving town, but very much besieged by insurgency. And you hear about Peshawar. Much of the news that you hear from Pakistan is dateline from Peshawar, and a lot of it is accurate. It is as difficult as they say, and it is a difficult environment. In the midst of that environment, there is the Christian church, and quite a number of churches. But the church that's in closest relationship with you is what is called the Church of Pakistan, which was formed in 1970 as a union of the long-standing presence of Anglicans and Presbyterians and Lutherans and Methodists. So it's an ecumenical united church, much like the other united churches of South Asia. The Church of South India was established in about 1948, of a similar configuration. The Church of North India in 1970, the Church of Bangladesh in 1971. And these are churches which have a minority Christian presence amidst the overwhelming Hindu and Muslim environments of South Asia. And this ecumenical movement, this movement for churches to organically join together, came out of their sense of mission. Their sense being, as we're talking with Hindus and Muslims and Sikhs and Jains, why should we be all separate groups, often perceived as competing with each other? Let's get together and be united churches. So the Church of Pakistan was established in 1970. Of those four groups, it has 8 dioceses, one of which is the Diocese of Peshawar. And its former bishop, Mano Rumal Shah, is an old friend of mine, and its current bishop, Humphrey Sarfaraz Peters. The first and last names are fairly Western, but the middle name signals that he's a true Pakistani, Humphrey Sarfaraz Peters, with whom I work very closely. He's been the bishop there for about 3 or 4 years, and is also a longtime friend. Now, let me just say a word about these pictures. I'm not going to comment on the pictures. They're just to give you a sense of the scene. And what you'll see will be some general pictures of Peshawar and its environs. You'll see pictures of Edwards College, and all of these students, as you can see, these are probably BA and BSc students. This is after our Friday noon chapel Eucharist, and we all get together out on the lawn for samosas and tea. You'll also see pictures of the chapel. You'll see pictures of classrooms, faculty teaching. You'll see some scenes from faculty meetings. You'll also see some scenes from nearby churches, All Saints Church in Peshawar and the Cathedral in Peshawar. And I'm not going to comment on them. I'm sure you'll be able to sort it out. It just gives you a sense of the ambiance of the place. When it comes to the college, which consists of lots of nice old Mughal-style buildings, you'll see lots of students in green. Green is the college color of Edwards College. And you'll see some women students and male students as well. It often comes as a surprise to people that there is such a thriving Christian community in Pakistan, because Pakistan is, as you know, an Islamic republic where Islam is the official language, and beyond that, as I'm sure you're aware, there's a lot of pressure on religious minorities. Now, the term minority in Pakistan does not mean ethnic minority or linguistic minority, still less a sexual minority. Rather, a minority as an unqualified term in Pakistan always means a religious minority, a Christian or a Hindu or a Sikh, typically. Now, Pakistan is presently the 6th most populous nation in the world. That may surprise you. The 6th most populous nation in the world. By the year 2050, it is predicted to be the 4th most populous nation in the world. So what happens in Pakistan makes a difference to the whole world. There are 200 million people in Pakistan today. Of those, about 5 million are Christians. So that's a percentage of about 2.5% of Pakistan's population are Christian. Now that's a small religious minority, but Christians are the largest religious minority. As you know, Pakistan was established in 1947 along with India, and there was that terrible partition between Pakistan and India, which was based on religious difference. Pakistan was to be a Muslim nation, India was to be a multi-religious nation, but obviously majority Hindu. And many in the Muslim minority did not feel comfortable being in a Hindu majority self-governing India. And so more than 1 million people lost their lives in that terrible breakage between August and November of 1947. And the scars of that are still very much with us. So the Christian community is the largest religious minority. There are Roman Catholics, there are Pentecostals, there are American Presbyterians who continue as a separate denomination. They are, by the way, the founders of Foreman Christian College, our elder sister college in the city of Lahore. Foreman Christian College was established in 1864, Edwards College in 1900. Now, the Diocese of Peshawar in the Church of Pakistan is one of 8 dioceses in the Church of Pakistan. There's the Diocese of Lahore, the Diocese of Multan, the Diocese of Raiwind, and the Diocese of Peshawar. There are about 100,000 Christians in Khyber Pakhtunkhwa province, and most of them are in the Diocese of Peshawar. Edwards was established in 1900 by the Church Missionary Society of the Church of England. And ever since then, it has been ministering with a focus on the Muslim community. Today, we have 2,950 students, close to 3,000 students. 92% of those students are Muslim. We have about 100 faculty, 90 of them are Muslim. We have about 260 Christian students. We have about 10 Christian faculty. So the primary reality of Edwards College as a church enterprise is that it is a church-sponsored college, but with a Muslim majority constituency. Most of my faculty are Muslim. Most of the students are Muslim, overwhelmingly. On the management team that runs the college, we are 9 members. 7 of us are Muslim, 2 of us are Christian. So every day I am working primarily in an interreligious context. Everything I do, it has to be interreligiously sensitive. And that's very important in the environment of extremism in Khyber Pakhtunkhwa province. You've heard about the bombings. I remember about a year ago, there were 97 people killed in a bombing just north of Peshawar. My return to the college this September was delayed a week because there was a bombing that targeted 2 U.S. consulates, 2 U.S. Americans who were associated with the consulate on their way to work. And I was to leave on Tuesday, the 4th of September. This bombing occurred on the 3rd. I called the bishop and my vice president, and they both said you should delay about a week. So I delayed about a week. So this is happening on an ongoing basis throughout the tribal agencies along the Afghan border and in the city of Peshawar itself. You doubtless heard about the so-called Innocence of Muslims video that prompted riots and protest demonstrations around the world. Pakistan was the place that was probably hardest hit. On the 21st of September, the national government, the federal government, proclaimed Yom-i-Ishq-i Rasul, which means Day of Love for the Prophet. And it was a national holiday. The government thought that that might tamp down the demonstrations. In fact, it seemed to have freed up people for particularly virulent demonstrations. In the city of Peshawar itself, 7 people were killed and over 70 were wounded on that day. The extremism, the bombings, the polarization of society prompts many thoughtful Pakistanis to be very discouraged. My first vice president said to me, "We did not used to be like this. We thought of ourselves as a secular society." And after the shooting of Malala Yousafzai, the 15-year-old girl who had been campaigning for girls' education against the Taliban, who had been bombing and shutting down schools all along that northwest frontier, after that, Kalimullah, the first vice president, we were at our management team meeting, and he had his head in his hands. He was almost weeping, and he said, "I'm not sure that we can recover from this." It was just such a devastating blow. You may have heard also about Rimsha Masih, the 11-year-old girl in Islamabad. She was accused of burning pages of the Quran, and therefore committing the sin of blasphemy. And let me just say something about working with the Christian community. In the chapel, we have morning prayer every day, a short service with a short homily. And since Easter, we've been reading through the book of Acts. And in September, we're in that part of the book of Acts where Paul is on trial repeatedly. He's been arrested, and he's on trial in front of Agrippa and in front of Festus and Festus's wife, and so on and so forth. And he spends 2 years in prison. And it suddenly hit me as I was offering these homilies on Paul's tribulations in the book of Acts. I said, it's amazing. He has to go on trial repeatedly. He spends 2 years in prison. He's encountering all of this bureaucratic jazz. There are 40 Jews who have conspired to kill him, and they're fasting until they can do so. I said, this was the Jewish Taliban of the first century. This was the Jewish Taliban of the first century. And then in terms of the trial of Rimsha Masih in Islamabad, I said, look at all of this bureaucracy that Paul was having to confront. And here we are praying for Rimsha Masih in this bogus trial that she's going through about supposedly burning the pages of the Quran. And first it looks like Rimsha's star is going down. And then some Muslims actually testify against the nearby mullah, accusing him of actually burning the pages and inserting them into this crummy little plastic bag in order to drum up this charge of blasphemy that would then result in all of that Christian community having to leave that part of town. So that looked like Rimsha's star was rising. But then a week later, we read in the paper that those who testified against the local mullah are now recanting their testimony. So there's this sense of just unremitting pressure on this very small Christian community, which is predominantly very poor. They are sweepers, toilet cleaners, and the like. And there was this resonance, this wonderful resonance between what the Christian community in Pakistan is experiencing and what Paul was experiencing in the book of Acts. And so here was the stories from the Bible just popping into 3D relief for these Christians. And that's the vitality of working with the Christian community there in this very interreligious environment. So the contribution of Edwards College amidst the polarization, the extremism, the religious intolerance is critical thinking, open discussion, and interreligious tolerance. The mission of Edwards College, as you'll read in that brochure, is to educate and develop professionals who will be servant leaders in meeting the challenges and opportunities of Pakistan today. Let me just say a word about that mission statement. We were working on it in the management team and getting ready to send it to the Board of Governors, and I was having a conversation with one of our English professors, a Muslim, and he said, leaders, developing leaders. You know, leaders are a dime a dozen in Pakistan. This is coming from a Muslim. He went on to say, leaders are a dime a dozen. We should be talking about servant leaders. And my inner response was, here I am, an Anglican priest, a Christian, who's heard a lot about servant leadership in the Episcopal Church and has actually talked about it. And this is a Muslim colleague saying we should be talking about servant leadership. So there was this another wonderful interreligious resonance. Because obviously for us as Christians, servant leadership has everything to do with Jesus Christ and what Paul talks about in terms of leadership in his epistles. And so that's a theme that resonates deeply with us. And I'm so glad that this term servant leaders was a contribution of one of our Muslim faculty at Edwards College. Now, we're doing this in a number of ways. We're doing it through transparency in leadership. We're doing it through gathering people together for consultation and collaboration. In faculty meetings, for the first time, we're having small group discussions. We've got 100 faculty, that's a lot of faculty, okay? We gather for monthly meetings. And what they are used to is everyone sitting in chairs and listening to the principal talk. Well, what we do, yes, there are announcements and that sort of thing, but every faculty meeting we have a discussion topic in which they have a real role to play in deciding policy. And so they gather at small tables like this, and we have maybe 20 minutes for discussion of, say, the new timetable, or discussion of this integrity project that I'm about to talk with you about, or discussion of how to create a syllabi, that sort of thing. And then those small groups bring their contributions back to the plenary. Now, we all know that. I'm sure you're very familiar with that style here at the cathedral. But that's something very new at Edwards College, because Pakistani society tends to be very hierarchical, very top-down. At the same time that people resent leaders, they are very obedient and subservient to leaders, because leaders tend to have much more power than leaders are used to having in this society. So we've established this integrity project to nurture ethical behavior and community responsibility. And it's not just me, and it's not just people at Edwards College. Commentators throughout Pakistan are bemoaning. I mean, Pakistan is a society on its knees. You've all read about it. Massive corruption, this crippling insurgency, an economy that is struggling. And in the midst of it all, everyone's out for themselves. And people are often after degrees just in order so that they can get into the best graduate program, so that they can get the best job that has the highest paying salary, and then begin to line their pockets. Now, how can we as an institution of higher education make a difference? Well, what we've inaugurated this year is an integrity project, which puts every student at the college into a small group discussion once a week on 8 topics, and we're working through these topics right through the academic year. The first topic is the purposes of education. That is to say, is it just to get a degree? Is it just for self-aggrandizement? Or is it to become a better human being? Is it to have a sensibility about what's going on in the world and how one can respond as a responsible citizen to what is going on in the world? So that's been our first topic, the true purposes of education. I was so heartened when I walked into a classroom in the Integrity Project and a student had written on the whiteboard, the purpose of education is for students to learn how to live together with people who are different. Now, in Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, along the Afghan border, that was music to my ears. Then in an assembly, a woman student got up. Her name is Maria Khalid, a Muslim, woman student. She said, I'm here because I want to become a better human being. Not just for a degree. She said, I want to be educated from the inside. That is to say, not with just the slapping on of a degree from the outside. You know, another very heartening response. So it is making a difference. The second topic that we're dealing with over these current 2 or 3 weeks is the discernment of talents. Why? Because practically every Pakistani family that has the opportunity to send its student, its child, to college, wants that child either to become a doctor or an engineer. And we have these, you know, very robust pre-engineering and pre-medical programs. Probably about 5% of those students are going to become doctors or engineers. So we need to be making our students aware of other creative career opportunities and helping them discern what their personal gifts and talents may be so that they can prepare themselves and so that they go for other careers not out of a sense of failure but out of a sense of vision. Let me just go quickly through the other topics. After the discernment of talents, we're talking about ethical understanding, then moral behavior, then gender relations, which is, women in Pakistan have a very tough row to hoe. There are these honor killings, there are kidnappings of women into marriage, there's just the dismissal of women's gifts left, right, and center. So gender relations is a crucial topic. Then diversity tolerance. That is to say, tolerance for diversity. Now, tolerance is a kind of magical word among Pakistani liberals. I've been saying to people, tolerance is crucial, but we need to get beyond tolerance to mutual exploration and learning from each other across ethnic differences, linguistic differences, religious differences. Because Pakistan is a place of many ethnicities and many languages. Baluchistan, Punjabi, Sindh, etc., etc. And then community responsibility, and finally, servant leadership. There's encouraging stuff. Now, how can you be involved? I know that you're concerned about women's education, and you've heard a lot about it. Edwards College, historically, is a men's college. And let me just say at the outset, that Edwards is a self-supporting institution. It has no endowment, but it is entirely self-supporting from fees, okay? So Edwards is not in a situation of, you know, sort of begging bowl out for just running. No, Edwards College runs fine, but like any college or university or seminary, Edwards does look for outside donors for special projects. And in our case, that means scholarships. Scholarships for women students, scholarships for Christian students. Out of the 2,950 students, 230 of those are women. And this year, we admitted every woman who applied. Women are there largely as a result of what in this country we would call affirmative action. That is to say, many of them come from much poorer schools. And so the academic threshold for getting into Edwards is lower. And the same is true of Christians. You might be startled to know that Christians in Pakistan are not the elite, as they are in many parts of the world. Rather, Christians in Pakistan are the downtrodden. Many of them came from Hindu lower castes, and they have persistently been kept at the bottom rung of society. 80% of the country's Christians are part of the underclass. As I said, sweepers, toilet cleaners, and the like, who live in these slums called bastis. Now, coming out of that environment and trying to get into Edwards College, we're about 18% selectivity. In other words, we only accept about 18% of applicants. So it's a highly selective place. Most of the Christians who are there because of affirmative action, because their grades are poor and they don't have the money to attend. So scholarships for women students and Christian students is a real need. And if you're thinking about helping, let me say one other thing. we admit a lot of students from those federally administered tribal agencies along the border. We have a residence hall for men's students, but we don't have one for women's students. We would love to have a residence hall so that we could accept women's students from the federally administered tribal agencies. You all heard about Greg Mortensen and those schools established by the Central Asia Institute and the scandal that proceeded out of that and so on. But nevertheless, they did do a lot of good work. And we would like to admit some of those women students from those far-off places into Edwards College, but we need a residence hall in which to house them. Now let me say something about interfaith reconciliation. As I've said, Edwards is a church-sponsored college with a majority Muslim constituency. There's a chapel and a mosque on campus, and both are very active. I've said something about the life of the chapel. The management team, we pray together every time we meet. This is an innovation for them, and for me, it's an innovation to be praying with Muslims every day. And 7 of us pray in the name of Bismillah, in the name of Allah, the most beneficent and the most merciful, and 2 of us pray in the name of the Holy Trinity or in the name of Jesus. And good discussions have come out of that, and some of the prayers of my Muslim colleagues have really stuck in my mind. One of our members, Fahim Khan, this was his prayer one morning. "O God, give us today our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, and the power, and the glory, forever and ever. Amen." I was just, woo, hello. Here's a Muslim praying the second half of the Lord's Prayer. Now, he didn't use the first half of the Lord's Prayer, because in the first half, God is addressed as Father, which is a scandal for Muslims. And the reference to the kingdom might have been too close to Jesus. But the second half of the Lord's Prayer, he prayed. And he prayed using that King James Version. I was just really quite blown away. Then our finance director, a young woman named Sana Manzoor, one morning she opened her prayer after the traditional invocation of Bismillah. She said, "O God of patience and creativity." Whoa. I thought, boy, patience and creativity, that's something we need. All of us working in Peshawar in that situation. The Bible and the Quran are read on public occasions. I'm hoping to establish a scriptural reasoning chapter at Edwards College. This is an interfaith exercise that has been developed at the University of Cambridge and at the University of Virginia, where people from different religions simply spend time reading their scriptures together. So a typical scriptural reasoning session, there might be a theme, maybe sacrifice, that I was talking about in the sermon this morning, and the Christians would introduce a scripture reading from the Bible on sacrifice, the Muslims from the Quran on sacrifice, the Hindus from, say, the Bhagavad Gita on sacrifice, the Sikhs on sacrifice. And I think that may be a very important opening for us at Edwards College. There's a Muslim professor in Lahore who could help us with that. Because here again, it's important that I not be necessarily the leader in something like that, except behind the scenes. This will work best if it comes from a Muslim expert, not from someone like myself. Recently, we had to add someone to our Islamiyat department at the college. That's the Department of Islamic History and Islamic Theology and so on. Every educational institution in Pakistan, including church institutions, must teach Islam. And so we do have a Department of Islam. It's a required subject for students. Minority students can take civics as an alternative. But a lot of minority students, meaning Christians, Sikhs, and Hindus, actually take Islamiyat because they want to learn more about the religion in which they are immersed. I was so encouraged by the questions that our Islamiyat department put together to be asked of the candidates in the selection committee. And let me read some of these questions to you. Are there interfaith similarities in the revealed religions? That's capital R, meaning Judaism, Islam, and Christianity. How would you teach Islamiyat with non-Muslims in the class, which obviously is the case at Edwards? What is your opinion about coeducation? Because coeducation is controversial. We are the only college that is coeducational in that whole province. And part of the reason we have fewer women students applying is because their families want them to attend all women's colleges. What activities and methods do you suggest for interfaith harmony at Edwards? What safeguards are provided by Islam for human rights? Give 2 examples of freedom of expression and belief from the Holy Prophet's life. What do you mean by servant leader? You can see how this term servant leader has really taken off. What do you mean by servant leader? Give examples of servant leadership from the life of the Sabaha, who were the companions of the Prophet Muhammad. So, that was encouraging. Those were not questions that I put together. Those were questions put together by our Department of Islamiyat. I could say a lot about women, but I want to leave space for your questions. So let me just summarize. My academic field is missiology. That is to say, the history and theology and practice of Christian mission. And those are what my published works have been about. And if you're interested, my most recent book is entitled Going Global with God, Reconciling Mission in a World of Difference. Now that final word difference means everything to me in terms of what mission is. You know, often Episcopal bishops, clergy, whatnot, use mission and ministry almost interchangeably. And I say, here are 2 words. How do they differ? How are they similar? I suggest to you that mission is ministry in the dimension of difference. Mission is ministry in the dimension of difference. That is to say, God calls us to all kinds of ministries. But when we are reaching beyond who we are and where we are, both as individuals and as communities, to reach other people and form community with people who are different from ourselves in some sociologically identifiable way, that is to say, nationality, language, religion, race, ethnicity, something like that, that is when we are distinctively on mission. So mission is ministry in the dimension of difference. Obviously, Peshawar is, for me, a place of difference. And that is mission, and I am a missionary because I'm ministering in that dimension of difference. I invite you to be part of that. Again, I want to say something I said in the sermon. The Episcopal Church's major mission investment is in places that are already overwhelmingly Christian. That is to say, in sub-Saharan Africa and in Latin America. And I honor that. I've been a part of that. Jane and I, my wife and I, were missionaries in Zimbabwe for 3 years with our 4 young children. And I often say our 4 children are card-carrying church members today because we were missionaries in Zimbabwe. Because they experienced the vitality of African Christianity. And they knew without a doubt that being a Christian was not some kind of, fetish of suburban folks in the USA. They knew without a doubt that the Christian movement is this amazing cross-cultural, multicultural phenomenon that has enormous vitality. So I've been very much a part of the Episcopal Church's investment, say, in African Christianity. But our church's investment, our church's involvement, our church's companionship with the church in places where it is immersed in Islam is tiny. There's another missionary in Cairo. There's another missionary who's sort of underground in Saudi Arabia. And that's about it in terms of majority Muslim environments. So Edwards College Peshawar provides a venue and an avenue for you in your discipleship in mission in the dimension of difference.